Today's sponsor is NetRef. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn more about a free webinar sponsored by NetRef that I'll be hosting. 5 ways to help teachers progress in their use of technology. How a little graphic novel is inspiring teachers to think. Episode 464.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
So today we're talking with Josh Stumpenhorst, and he has a new book coming out called Drawn to Teach. Now, Josh is the Learning Commons Director of a junior high school in Illinois, and that includes library, video production, makerspace, wood shop, digital fabrication lab, and that's probably going to be a whole other conversation for another podcast. But Josh, you have created a graphic novel to help teachers become better. What's the idea behind having a graphic novel for us?
Yeah, it started, probably almost 2 years ago. I was reading Dan Pink's The Adventures of Johnny Bunko, which is a graphic novel that he wrote for business. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to create a graphic novel for teachers? I mean, that's where the idea ran. And I knew I didn't have any artistic ability whatsoever. So I got a good artist on my side. And we just developed this idea of a way to create a narrative to really show what teachers know and live and experience every day.
It's actually a very easy read. And as I'm reading about, starting the school year right and class rules and building relationships, by seeing a character move through common mistakes, do you think we stand back and look at things a little differently?
Well, I hope so. My goal was really to put a face on the profession of what we do and put real life examples. I think a lot of books that are out there have these grandiose plans and these examples, but they don't have that connection. And I think writing the characters in for me was quite an experience because I wrote in some of my own teachers, some of my colleagues, some of my children's teachers. And I think it just puts that human face on it that I think a lot of teachers can step back and look at and go, man, that is exactly what I went through. I went through that exact same thing. And then after that graphic novel piece, just give them some real simple, real practical strategies and skills that they can use to help themselves grow in those areas.
And, there's such a real disconnect between so many books about teaching and the real profession of teaching. I think when I started teaching, it was really a jolt.
Everybody went to school, so everybody has an opinion on it and everybody thinks they're experts on it because they experienced it. And I don't think people recognize the realities of what we deal with every day. And that's what I'm trying to really put quite literally a face on with the characters and the stories that we created in this book.
But I don't feel like you're preachy. I kind of feel like you're in the trenches with me as a teacher.
Yeah, and that was my goal. And it's funny because I had a conversation with a colleague just recently who read the book. And she said to me, I felt like I was having a conversation with you about what goes on in a school and I could relate to it. And you were challenging me, but you weren't telling me if I didn't do it this way, I was a bad teacher, which I think there's a lot of that out there. I just wanted to say, hey, here's some great stuff that I've seen from other people, some great things that have worked for me. Give it a try or try something different. But I think the idea is just do whatever you can to be better. And that's kind of the outcome I'm hoping that teachers will walk away when reading it.
Well, I also like that you have research at the end of each chapter because, one way that they kind of shut down teachers is say, oh, but the research says, and they kind of pull away from what teachers actually live because, teaching is hard. It's hard to change. And truthfully, it's hard to read a very long book during the school year about teaching.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I did want the research. I didn't want too much because I didn't want it to feel like it was, overpowering. And we're constantly inundated in our profession with research-based strategies, which are great. But there's also something to be said about the craft. We obsess a lot about the science, but I think the craft is so important.
Yeah.
But I wanted some research to justify some of the things that I say, but I wanted it to be kind of peripheral, not the focus of the whole book. I want the focus to be on teachers and kids because that's really what the profession's about.
So when you sat down ahead of time, Josh, and you kind of drafted out, all the common mistakes and common struggles that teachers have, what do you think is the biggest mistake that teachers make that you knew you had to address in the book? And what was it?
Well, I think the very first chapter is where I wanted to start off, this whole notion of relationships. And I think there's so many things out there when we talk about wanting to get kids to buy into what we're teaching them, even when sometimes we know that they're not going to need what we're trying to teach them in the long run. And I think that everything we do in schools, whether an administrator, whether a classroom teacher, a bus driver, it doesn't matter. It's all about the relationships we have with our colleagues and with our kids. And there are some that do it really, really well, and there's some that do it really, really poorly. And I've experienced everything in between. And so to me, that was my number one focus. I wanted to come through in this whole book, just from chapter 1 and then bleed into all the other chapters, is it's about the people. Doesn't matter what kind of product, what kind of procedures, what kind of plans. If you don't have the right people and you don't have the right mindset, nothing's going to matter.
And truthfully, over my 17-year career, there have been years that I have built good relationships with colleagues and students, and years that I did not invest in those relationships. And it was like night and day. When you have those relationships, you not only have meaning and purpose, but you have more learning.
Oh, for sure. And it's so easy to see the value in that. When you look at a kid that I have a relationship with, and I see a colleague who doesn't have a relationship interact with that kid's going to react completely different. And the same goes for, in colleague relationship. If you don't have those good, positive relationships, the work is that much harder to motivate, to engage, to, relate. It just makes our jobs easier. And I think in the end, it just makes it so much more fulfilling for us and for our colleagues and for the kids.
Now, I haven't gotten there yet, but, one struggle that there can be is when you do become a teacher who has great relationships with students, sometimes other colleagues can view that in not such a positive light because it does take away an excuse in some ways. Do you address that? Or if you didn't, how do we deal with that?
So that does come up in the book, because there have been times where I've had colleagues get frustrated with me because of something new I was doing or a relationship I had with a kid. I've had kids come back to me and complain about this teacher because they didn't do something this way or that. And that's a reality I think we all have. I have a section in the book dealing with that exact issue. And at the end of the day, we can only control ourselves. And when a kid comes and complains, we don't entertain that because that's not professional. We can certainly, have conversations with our colleagues. But I always come back to, at the end of the day, I can only control what I do with the students in my classroom and the relationships and the opportunities I put out to my colleagues. Because I think sometimes we kind of have that martyr syndrome where we have to fix everything and be best friends with everybody and do everything for everybody. And then we end up burning out. And this may sound selfish. And I hope it doesn't come across that way, but we have to worry about ourselves and our students above all else.
Josh, you've been traveling and speaking for a while about the teaching profession. What are the hot buttons right now with teachers? What are the things that have teachers the most upset?
It's the same old stuff. I don't think it's changed in my years. I think the standardized testing is always a frustration. My least favorite phrase I hear so often is, you go to a meeting and they talk about data-driven decisions. And I always push back and say, can we talk about kid-driven decisions? Because data has value, data has importance, but what data, how it's collected and how it's used is more important. And I think, as always, is going to be an issue is how much is being asked of teachers. I especially think about my elementary colleagues. The amount of stuff that is put on those teachers' plates is unbelievable. Like I can't even fathom how they even function on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I don't think any concerns that teachers have are any different. I think the biggest concern that you could say is new is the technology and the social media aspect of it. And I think we're just beginning to really understand that the negative and positive, consequences of all of that.
Well, as we finish up, would you give a 30-second pep talk to teachers everywhere? Because this is March and, March is well named because we have to march ahead in March. Sometimes it feels like the school year's never going to end. How can teachers stay motivated and excited to bring their best every day for the kids?
Yeah, I agree with you. It does feel like there's a madness in the air at this time of year. Kids are more rambunctious. And I just tell teachers, and play on the word of the title is drawn to teach. Just think about what drew you to teaching and what you love about doing. And I always tell them that, this is the hardest time of year, but this is where you see all of the value and the dividends being paid of all of the things that you've done this year to build those relationships and work with those kids. You start seeing that return on that investment that you've been putting in all year, and it will happen. And it may not happen right now. It may happen next year. It may happen 5 years down the road, but I promise you will see the return on all the work for this year that you've done up to this point.
Great advice. The book is Drawn to Teach, a graphic novel, and it has already just come out this March. So pick it up, and I think you'll find it a very fun, informative, encouraging, and powerful read. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
NetRef is sponsoring this month's free webinar. On Tuesday, March 26th at 4 p.m., I'll be sharing 5 ways to help teachers progress in their use of technology. These are 5 simple methods to help teachers level up in their ability to use classroom technology. If you're a teacher, administrator, or an instructional technology director, you'll get something out of this webinar. Go to coolcatteacher.com/netref to register. And stay tuned to learn more about NetRef and their powerful internet monitoring and reporting tool for schools.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.